So this is a lesson intended for a fourth grade inclusive classroom. And today what we're going to be learning about is how to round numbers to the nearest 10, 100, and 1,000th place. I would start by explaining that to round a number is to change a number to a simpler number of roughly the same value. So it's basically like an estimate. And I imagine at this point that a potential misconception might be that the word estimate means to guess. So I would explain that to estimate differs because there are rules, which we'll explain as we're teaching the lesson. I would move into doing a recap of what I imagine the student's prior knowledge at this point would be, which would be of place value. So I would draw a number on the board, 62,175, and I would point out that 5 is in the ones place, 7 is in the tens place, 1 is in the hundreds place, 2 is in the thousands place, and 6 is in the 10,000s place. And that a place value is a digit's position within a larger number. And then I would talk a little bit about why estimating is useful. So for example, I might say if I wanted to purchase 3 items at a store, one for $1.89, one for $4.93, and one for $6.05, that instead of having to add those 3 numbers up in my head to determine how much money I need, that I would just round them to 2, 5, and 6 and do a quick calculation that I would need about $13. And that would be an example of when estimating is useful in the real world. I would then ask the class when they have seen or used estimation in the real world and try to get a discussion in the class to get a sense for where everyone was with prior knowledge. The next thing I would move to is showing a video, the Brain Pop video on rounding, which is 2 cartoon characters explaining why we round and the rules of rounding. I would show that video 2 times for students who had any auditory processing problems, ADHD, a tough time paying attention, so that they would get a second crack at understanding the information. And then at the end of the video, I would give a really quick 5-question pop quiz on the information that was in the video, just to assess where everyone in the class was with the information that they had received thus far. I would then go on with the lesson by explaining again that we were going to be rounding numbers to the nearest 10, 100, and 1,000 using the rounding roller coaster. And on the rounding roller coaster, we see that any number 4 or less is going to round down, any number 5 or greater is going to round up. So I would start with drawing a number on the board, a simple one to start, like the number 27. And I would explain that if we're going to round a number to the nearest tens place, we're going to look at the number to the right of the tens place to determine if we're going to round the number up or down. So for the example of 27, 7 is to the right of the 2, which is in the tens place. If we look on the rounding roller coaster, we see that 7 is on the right side, which means we're going to go higher. So 27 rounded to the nearest 10 is going to equal 30. I would also, to further clarify, show a number line with the numbers 20 through 30, and that 27 is only 3 spaces away from 30, 3 digits away from 30, but 7 away from 20. 27 is closer to 30, therefore if we're rounding 27 to the nearest tens place, we're going to round it up to 30. I would do several examples of 2-digit numbers rounded to the tens place, calling on random students and getting a sense for how the class was doing. And then I would move up to rounding to the hundreds place and go through the same process. So 224 to the nearest 100, we're going to look at the number that's to the right of the 2, which is in the hundreds place, which is also a 2. We refer to our rounding roller coaster and see that 2 is on the left side, so we're going to round the number down. So 224 to the nearest 100 equals 200. And I could do a similar thing with the number line showing that 224 is closer to 200 than it is to 300. I would do several examples of rounding numbers to the hundreds place, calling on students randomly to get a feel for how the class was doing, and then move to the thousandths place and repeat the process. After I had a sense that the class was more or less understanding rounding to the tens, hundreds, and thousands, I would move on to a word problem. An example of a word problem I might put on the board is Mount Rushmore is 5,725 feet above sea level. about how high is Mount Rushmore above sea level to the nearest 1,000. I would explain how we know when a word problem is asking us to round, and I would do the problem with everyone. I would then put a few more word problems on the board, divide the students up into partnerships, and have them work on the remaining word problems on their own, while I walked around the classroom and just informally assessed how everyone was doing with the problems. After that, I would bring the whole class back together. I would do a few more slightly more complicated examples on the board, again calling on random students and getting a sense for where the class was, and ask if there was any questions. The next step I would take in teaching this lesson is to give a very quick 2-question pop quiz, something like this. So this is a 2-question quiz where one problem is moderately difficult and one is more challenging. What I would do with this is any students who got both questions correctly would move on to doing more challenging work independently on their own, out of a worksheet that I would have pre-prepared. Any students who got one correct and one incorrect would be doing grade level rounding problems out of what I would assume would be their math workbook. And any students that got both questions incorrect would be working with me in a small group where I would repeat and review the lesson and give them more individualized attention. I would use this differentiation to assign homework for that evening. So any of the students who were 2 questions correct and doing better with their understanding would receive more challenging homework. 1 and 1 would receive grade level homework, and the students who weren't quite understanding it yet would be assigned homework at their level. Before we left for the day, I would let everyone know that there was going to be a test the following day on this to come with their homework completed and be ready for the test. And after asking if anyone had any questions, that would be the end of my